Appreciate you being here as we record this today, and those of you watching online as well. It's been fun this way. And then some of you local, glad you're here. I want to start in a smaller setting, but the media people refuse to let me do it. They say, no, the best quality that we have is the sound system here and the lighting and all that, and they love to do that. And they say that helps us with the online audience. And so that's the reason why we do it here in the sanctuary. But thanks for being here today. We've got some good stuff I think I'll share with you that I believe will be a blessing to you. And also got a lot of you that are guests I'm grateful for to see you here. Some that have driven as far as over in the Macon, Georgia area. Tim, I was with you last week at Evangelism Conference, and so grateful for you. And then my neighbor Bill, glad you're here. And hunting has been going real well. I know you. Last month I asked Charlie, I said, have you seen Bill? He said, he's hunting. And Bill Reeves is one of the best guys that you know, and he's got some trophy animals at his place where he's been around and done some stuff. Got another special guest with me today that's pretty cool. You're going to enjoy him. I'm going to interview him afterwards when we set up this time. Dr. Tim Cook is here. And Tim is a college president and a fantastic young guy. Actually, a dear friend. I conducted he and Jordan's wedding a few years ago, and you just had a beautiful little baby, and so congratulations on that, buddy. And Tim's been a golf pro and a golf instructor, and so with his college, what he's doing is we're going to go today and we're going to play golf, and we're going to negotiate a deal between the colleges he's oversees and between BPL leadership, so that all the students and all the colleges, and they're worldwide, so that all of them will be able to get BPL as well. So that's a big, big move. So we're going to work that out on the golf course today, and look forward to it. And Tim's going to teach me some things that I'm probably going to need. So get ready, buddy. I'm going to put your prayer life at a whole new level. I'll ask you for some insight in just a moment as we go through. But let me talk to you today about questions that every leader has got to ask himself. These are the questions that if a leader doesn't ask himself, the problem is that he may drift off course at some point. And I believe that obviously leadership is the issue of personal and continual growth. It has to be something that you do not just now, but you do for as long as you want to grow. There are a lot of getting off places if you're going to grow in life. There's a lot of places where you can get off, and you can enjoy that level if you like. Or you can constantly push the envelope and keep seeing how far you can go. Most people will take an exit ramp at some place. Somebody asked me one time, said, Pastor, when does the church quit growing? And I said, that's the easiest question I will ever answer. The church quits growing when the price to pay for growth becomes too high. Whatever that level is, at 20, at 50, at 1,000, whenever it becomes too high, that we don't want to pay the price anymore, that's when we quit growing. So we can grow as far as we want to if we'd like. Now, leadership, has all kind of functions around it. It has, if you're a leader, you got to be responsible for vision and team building and problem solving and tons of other things. Raising money is another big one. Raising up leaders is one. Leading change is one. Inspiring people, keeping people motivated that need to be motivated. So if you're leading, you've got all those different hats. I'm going to give you quickly kind of 4 kinds of leadership, because you're always going to find yourself in one of these areas. One is leading up. Leading up means this, that you don't really have any power. It means that you don't have a position on the chart that's high up. But you lead up by the way you live, by influence, by trust. People know to go to them. I have some people in my life that don't have a lot of influence in the world or big powerful positions, but there are 2 of them I'm thinking of right now that I don't make many big moves without talking to them, because they always seem to have a good feel for the world around them. So I will basically give a call and say, I'm thinking about doing something. What do you think? And they give me a good insight. So leading up is from people that may not have the position, but they know how to lead up. Then there's leading down. Leading down is when people have a position. You don't want to be controlling. You don't want to be threatening, but you do want to be firm, and you have to be focused. You can't lead anybody if you're not focused on where you're going. You're responsible for a lot of the things they do, but leading down is a way to realize that's responsibility. A lot of things I'd have liked to not done through my life, but I had to do it just like you did. I had to do it because I had a family to feed, or because I had people a staff that needed to grow or needed more opportunity. And so throughout your life, if you're leading down, always do it with the idea that what's best for them. And some of you may know this. It's a pretty cool thing. Last 2 weeks ago, we paid off all of our debts. Cascade Hill is now totally debt-free. Wrote a check for $4.6 million and paid it all off. And that was one of the goals that Pastor Brent had actually set and said, we can achieve this. Let me show you how to do it, and really led us through that. And over a few years, so that was good leadership. But his way of doing it was he said, there's no reason to give in the bank interest money, no reason to not being able to do more in ministry, and we can utilize this, and it will make the people feel better. They will know that my investment was widely used. That was good leading down. There's leading lateral. That's when there's people around you. The leading lateral means you don't have any power over, but they work with you. And when you lead laterally, you're helping people around you to just learn how to do little things. I'll give you a little illustration I do that it's just a habit, but when I walk, when I get out of my car, if I'm walking toward a spot around here, I just have never thought about it. I never told anybody to do it. I just do it. If I'm walking and I see a piece of paper on the ground, or I see a straw or a napkin or whatever, I just pick it up. I don't wait for the guy who does the yards to pick it up. I just pick it up, and as I walk by the trash can, I throw it in. Well, a while back, one of the people that walked with me and one of the security team guys said, have you ever noticed the influence you have doing that pickup stuff? And I said, no. They said, we've now find ourselves, every time we walk somewhere toward our car around here or something, we'll pick up a piece of paper and throw it in the trash. And they said, we were noticing other days about 7 or 8 people that have been around you, and they're doing those things without ever having said, hey, that's what we ought to do. They just watched that. That's what leading lateral is. It's that people are watching and you're leading people around you. Then the biggest one is this one we'll talk about today. It's self-leadership. This is the one you win or lose with. You win or lose with self-leadership. That's the part where David himself did it in 1 Samuel 30. David encouraged himself in the Lord. You're going to go with some seasons sometime in your life where it's going to be very difficult to put one foot in front of the other. You're going to perhaps battle with discouragement, or you don't have somebody in your life that comes along at the right time. And your battle is going to be won in how you lead yourself. 50% of your energy is pretty much there. It is the difference, I believe. Self-leadership is the difference between average leadership and outstanding leadership. Self-leadership is that ability that says, I've got to do this, or I get to do this, and so therefore I'm going to do this. And most leaders will plateau over time because they neglect self-leadership. And so if you look, in fact, by the way, if you look at the pattern of Jesus, you'll see that he did it real well. He was always about the Father's business. He was always about taking care of what was his inner love or his inner passion. And so Jesus did it right with that. So why don't we do it? Why don't we lead ourselves? Why do we have to have sometimes people that motivate us or inspire us or people that challenge us? 2 reasons are, one is maybe we're too focused on others. We only do it when people are watching. And 2 is maybe we don't see the value of it. That's the big thing for me, is that most people that I know, if you try to talk to them about self-leadership and about wanting to personally grow, the hardest thing that I think I've ever gotten people to do, I can share the gospel a lot easier with people that don't even know God. That's not difficult. But the most difficult thing I do, if you say, what's the biggest challenge you have? It's getting people to see the value of leadership. If they can see the value, it'll change their life. I would love to say, we've got thousands of people that listen and been training thousands over the years of BPL and leadership stuff. But the truth is I know a lot of people that need it that didn't, won't apply it, won't take it. Some of you remember one time I did an interview with Jim Blanchard, a local business guy, and he said to me, he said, Bill, I teach leadership down at, I think that time, Synovus or something, and he said, I teach it and I make it available to all the employees. He said, now, the ones that come, nobody's forced, nobody has to, the ones that show up don't really need it as much. He said, they're the ones that they're already doing their job. He said, the ones that don't show up are the ones that need to be there, but they don't see the need for it. Have you ever seen that before? the people that you think they should be the ones hungry for it because they don't perform at the level they could, and it's for them just to get by. And the people that do want it, they'll make a way to make it happen. I made the promise many years ago when Debbie and I financially it was tough times. I made the promise then that if I had $5 and I could buy a book or I could buy lunch, the book always comes first, always. Now, I haven't missed any lunches either, but I always said there'll never be a question of if I can grow in leadership and I can get a book or I can learn something or I can have a meal, I would rather grow. See, I figured if I would grow enough, I'd be able to afford to eat wherever I wanted to eat later. But if all I did was spend my money on the hamburgers, the problem is that I wasted the money. And so it became a goal to read and to learn and to grow. And I wish I could say I've done more of it. I know now in my own life, whenever there's a slowdown, it's generally because I've kind of gotten diverted into something else. So there's some questions. Seeing the value of it's going to help you. When you know the value, now here's the questions I want to give you. These are the questions you've probably heard of before. John Maxwell mentioned one or two of these in 360-degree leadership. I think Bill Hybels has talked about some of these. Every leader probably has had one or two of those. I'd love to say they're all original, but they're not, because I remember somebody at some point, if I knew the name of anybody that ever inspired me, I'd be glad to tell you, but these are kind of in my wording, okay? Here's the questions I'd want to know. Number one is my calling sure? Is my calling sure? Whatever I'm doing in life, do I know that's where I'm supposed to be? If I know that's where I'm supposed to be, then I'm going to have more energy because I want to do that job. I want to be a part of that job. The last thing you want is people on a job that don't want to be there, or people that are just waiting for the clock to turn to 5 or waiting for the check. That gives you the confidence. The creator of the universe has a job for all of us, but I look at it and say, okay, people need to know in my job, am I committed to it? And do I live for it? And so the number one thing you got to have is the clear calling has got to be settled. If I'm called, I'll stick in there when others quit. If I'm called, I will not just bail. I remember one time hearing we were ordaining a guy, and sometimes you don't know what's going on until they're being ordained. And I stopped the ordination. We were in a room, and they got me at the last minute to come in, and that was one that kind of slipped through the radar, and slipped through the cracks. And so I show up in a room, and there's a young guy in our church, wonderful guy, and just got out of seminary, and some of the staff said, Pastor, we're going to ordain him tonight, and so I think next week, because there's a week notice, said we're going to ordain him in a week from now. But normally I'd know it in advance. And one of the questions we asked was this. Somebody said, well, tell me about your call to ministry. And I'm over here writing notes and doing something. I'm listening, but I'm also doing something else. And I heard him say, well, I don't think that there is such a thing as a call. He said, I think there's a need constitutes a call. And so he began to try to explain that. And as he did that, then they went on to the next question. I remember stopping. Gene Boyd was in the room. Remember that? And I shut my note and said, whoa, hold on. Go back to that question again. What was that answer you gave? He said, a need constitutes a call. Now, that's not true. If I'm driving down the road and somebody has a car wreck and I go help them, that don't make me a doctor, okay? I'm not called to be a physician because I helped a guy there. That was a need, but that didn't mean I'm called. And so I said, I do not believe that. And so we had to postpone his ordination till we got some of that stuff straight. If you're called, see, if it's just a need, you get in a situation and then all hell breaks loose and tough times come, it's real easy to leave then. You don't have to be rooted then. If you're called, you learn to stay in and stick in no matter what. In fact, if you're called, you know what you wish? You wish you could leave. You wish you weren't called at times, so you could just pick up your hat and move on. That'd be a whole lot easier, but you can't. And you can't because there's a divine call on your life that means in season and out of season. It means when everything's going well, when things are not going well. So that's the first question is, am I called? I even tell people on our staff, I'll do this annual retreat thing with them, and I'll say, look, if you don't know you're called to be at Cascade or if that's changed, don't stay miserable and don't be afraid to let me know. Just let me know. I'm no longer to be in this role. And gently pack up and go to where your role is. Don't hang into a situation where you're not called to be. Number two, the question a leader ought to ask himself is my vision clear? Is my vision clear? See, if it's not clear to you, how's it going to be clear to them? It's got to be very crystal clear to you, and you've got to constantly keep a picture of that vision in front of you. It's your vision that produces passion. The people around me hear me talk about my vision. And it's got to be for you, whatever that vision is that you have, it ought to be big enough it stretches your faith. I have a vision here at Cascade Hills, and it's never changed. I want to reach people that do not go to church. I want to reach the unchurched. I want to reach the people. I don't want a church member. I don't want somebody that went somewhere else and come join us. Anybody can do that. I want to reach the people that do not go to church with the gospel that changed me. And so that's our hope. And as I understand the Bible, that's what churches ought to be doing. And so that's the vision part. And 1,000 other things will come along and try to get you off track. And everybody's got an idea that they'll give you that they think's a good idea. Hey, you ought to try this. Have you considered this? And if you don't know what your vision is, I guess anybody else's vision will do. So you got to know what your vision is and what you're called to do, and stick to what you do on a regular basis. Now, the third thing is this. Is my passion hot? Is my passion hot? Now, here's the deal. You are responsible for your passion. You're responsible. Nobody else is. You're responsible for your passion, how you fuel that. And it's up to you to keep your batteries charged. You can't say, well, they pulled me down, they made me feel bad, da-da-da, all that stuff. Your key leaders. Your goal's got to be, what do you do that makes your passion hot? What is it that when you do it, you love doing that? And you would do that for anything. That's what you want to do. And so the passion issue is you. I joke sometimes that there's about 3 of us on staff that are older than all the young guys, but our passion is every bit as good as theirs. Every bit. Probably better in some cases. I don't want to put the excuse, well, we're getting older. I want to be the guy that's flaming out at the end. They just say, man, even when he died, he was still trying to conquer. And I'd rather go out that way. I think that sometimes we have a tendency to not watch the passion level of our life. And when we don't watch that, we find ourselves dragging through everything else. Number 4, is my character clean? Now, if you're going to lead, you have to understand integrity is what's going to keep your followers over the long haul. That's what's going to keep your followers. And so the question is going to be now, am I trustworthy? Can they say this is somebody worth following? And so the integrity issue is this. I've always said, you can get to the top without integrity, okay? You can get there faster without integrity, but you can't stay there without it. If you're gonna be at a place long term, now they're coming not because of what you told them, but because of what they see. And so the key on keeping integrity is it keeps you in the game a whole lot longer. And by the way, you can get away with lack of integrity in the workplace out there for a little while. It's okay. You can't do it in ministry. I'm speaking to a lot of pastors and a lot of you that are watching online. You don't get the privileges other people get. You just don't. I was with a group of pastors just 2 nights ago up in South Carolina, and we were together for a few minutes, and they began to mention names of one after another that tagged out. Well, you know so-and-so? Yeah, he's no longer in ministry. He messed up and ran off with a woman. You know so-and-so? He had this problem. And by the time they got through, I thought, man, is anybody else still standing? I'm glad you're still here. And the problem is they get tagged out pretty quick because they lose it there. In the marketplace, you can get away with it. In the Christian life, that's part of your whole witness. People watch that. So you got to ask yourself, where am I most vulnerable? What is it that in your life could take you out of the game? And there's several things. There's money, sex, power. I mean, think about that for a minute. If you look at, in your life, there's some people that a little bit of money will suddenly make them become a different person. Now, they were always, that's who they were on the inside, but you got to watch it. How much money does it take? I was grateful for this. I shared this with somebody the other day. It helped me. You got to check yourself at times. I had a book that just sold, that's my first book, and it actually did very, very well, much better than I ever thought it would. And so somebody came up and approached me and told me, said, you won't believe how well this is done. And they gave me this number, and it was very surprising. And when I saw how well it was, I thought, man, I can bless my family, I can bless my friends, I can bless the church. This is pretty sweet. And so my excitement went up a little bit when I saw it. That's a whole lot better than saying your book didn't sell and you owe them money. So it was a good note that they handed me. But I tell you what really checks me more than anything, because I've never loved money. I give it, most of you know, I'll give money away. But when I got that very hour, I spoke a few minutes later to a group of people. And a guy gave his life to God. And when that guy gave his life to God, I felt my passion level was through the roof. I mean, when I got in the car, I kept thinking, can you believe this guy that gave his life to God? Man, that is so awesome. And I'd known him for years. And I was so thrilled about that. And the person in the car caught me. He's a very smart guy. He said, now, I like that. And I said, what? He said, Bill, I always knew it, but do you realize you just went through a test? And I said, no. He said, I was the one that got to see how much money you just made. He said, and you were good with it. He said, and then I watched this one guy give his life to God, and man, you act like we just had a baby around here. He said, you know what that was? And I said, what? He said, that was a test. He said, that was your test to see which one of those was more important. And I thought about it, he's right. You know, what is it that excites you the most? You know, and so, and that's true. And so that's an exciting thing. But check, money could be, for some people, a real test. It could be, sex is one. I mean, I've known a lot of good people that messed up the first moment somebody flirted with them, the first moment they got a little bit of attention, they were doing good, and then all of a sudden somebody got them and they derailed. It could be power. Always ask yourself the question, if this person had power, would they use it to hurt or to help? And you'll be tested with power. It's okay. You should be. But always remember, the purpose of power is to empower. It's never for yourself. The purpose of it is to help others. And so if I know that I have power or influence, use it in the right way. Some, it's fame. Some people, their area where their passion would go and where their character wouldn't be clean is in the area of fame. There are a lot of people that just want to be famous. They want to be known. They want to be, that's why, by the way, the world loves that. That's why there's so much on Facebook. Everybody wants friends, and then they cry if somebody drops them. You know, it's ridiculous, but they just want that. And I can tell you from the perspective of somebody that's got a little bit of being known, you really don't want it, okay? I mean, I live in an area where it's hidden, and every time more people grow, I was on the backwater, and suddenly it got bigger around me. So I said, okay, it's time to leave. I wouldn't recommend you do this, but I went and bought a house and didn't tell my wife. I went home, and I just said, okay, I'm getting out of here. I mean, too many neighbors. I love being alone. I don't like the limelight. So I drove down the road and saw a house for sale and talked to the guy and bargained for a great deal. And I went back and told my wife, guess what? I bought us a house. And I got to tell you, that tested us. She immediately said, I don't want a house. I got a house. I just got through decorating this one the way I want it. I know, but you're going to love this one. And we went over there, and it was really not, it was some cold nights for a little while with what in the world have you done? You went off and done this. And I'll tell you why I did it. See, I made a mistake when I first got married, and I promised I'd never do it again, and I broke the promise. And so that's what, when we first got married, Debbie and I started with nothing, and I knew if we had anything, I had to work hard. So we saved up. She used to use a laundromat when we first got married, okay? So we'd go down the street to the laundromat. Well, then we saved up $423 that we were going to buy a washer and a dryer. So I borrowed a friend's truck, and she sent me off to go buy this washer and dryer with my $423. I drove to get the truck, and to get the washer. On the way, I saw a dirt bike for sale on the side of the road. And I just started thinking, you know, I used to race dirt bikes, and I was young then. I thought, I tell you what I do, I can buy that dirt bike with the $400, and then every Friday night I can go up to Penton, Alabama, and race it and make $100. In 4 weeks, I can get back the $400. So I'll have both the dirt bike and I'll get the washer and dryer. So that was my idea in my head, so I bought the dirt bike. Well, can you imagine, here's this new bride waiting at home, no children, but waiting so she don't have to go to the laundromat, and I pull up in a truck, and there's a dirt bike on the back. And she wants to wear a washer and dryer, and I give her my plan. Well, that didn't work, okay? You can't wash clothes and dry clothes with a dirt bike. So that was our first big misunderstanding about we're a team here, and you usually got to talk to each other. So I promised I'd never do it again. Then when I bought this house, I did it again. But the good is, I told her, you're going to meet some of my neighbors. We met Bill, went to dinner with him at his house. See, there's nice people in the neighborhood. See how great it is. So we're past that now and doing well. But what I'm telling you is, when it comes to influence, I didn't want to be known more. I want to hide out. If you're craving, be careful if you like. If somebody applauds you, be careful. Have a deaf ear. Don't let praise go to your head. Don't let adoration, don't let admiration, don't let any of that stuff go to you. If you do, in time it can create for you an appetite that wants more of it. So watch the areas that you think, if I were going to fall or a weak area of my life, what I need to shore up. Number 5, here's another question we have to ask. Is my pride subdued? Is my pride subdued? Now, we ought to be thankful to God for all the blessings that he's given to us. We ought to be grateful to God, and we ought to brag on God for all he's done. And I don't think we ought to shut up about it, but if I ask if my pride's subdued, I want to know, humility causes God to pour his grace on you. If we're humble, if we will recognize it was God that did it, God will give us the desires of our hearts. Humility means whenever God's blessed you and everybody sees God's blessed you, that you go privately and get in a room alone and you say, God, thank you. I mean, you and I both know where I was, where we started. God, you've been good to me. And so if we keep the pride down, it will make a big difference. I can tell you this. On our staff, probably from 2006 to about 2012 maybe, or maybe 10, for about 4 years there, we had a pride problem among some staff that I didn't know we had. And one by one, God just started moving some staff. And my son told me, he said, Dad, when you take the pride ride, he said, you're gone. He said, the moment you take the pride ride, you're out of here. And his thinking was this. He said, have you ever noticed God don't put up with pride too long? I mean, he may tolerate a lot of other stuff, but pride, he just seems to deal with quick. And we've said this. Pride seems to be like jumping out the window. You know, if you're going down a building, you can go down several ways. You can go down the stairs, and that's a slower route. Or you can go down the elevator, and people can do that. And so if a person messes up, they go out that way. Pride has a way of almost like leaping out the window. Your whole life's over. And so be very careful. Watch that part of your life and make certain in your life that there's within you a constant state of gratitude before God. Now let me give you number 6. This one is an interesting one. Are my psychological wounds undermining my leadership? Now, when I mean are my psychological wounds undermining my leadership, that means this. Maybe you didn't grow up in a perfect environment. The stuff below your line in your life, the stuff that's under the surface could be affecting all the other decisions of your life. And what I mean by that is if you're unhealthy internally, the more you're blessed and the more you're leading, the more those factors are going to surface. You'll try to control by pressure, or you may want to try to get security by performance, or you try to please everybody else, or you're driven because you need to prove to yourself that you've overcome those wounds. Maybe you went through a broken home. Maybe you didn't get love coming up. Maybe you were never the one that knew how to handle any of the attention or all the other stuff. So when you got into leadership, you suddenly got power, you suddenly got opportunity and all that. And you have to make sure that all those things underneath the surface, those psychological wounds that were there before, are not going to affect the decisions you make from here on. Some people, the biggest problem is themselves. It's between their own ears. You put them in a spot. For example, I'm thinking about a guy one time. I put him in a spot, and I didn't know how damaged he was emotionally. He was good looking. He could attract. He had a great personality and all the rest. He had all the credentials. So I put him in a place, and he grew well for a little while, and then all of a sudden he just started creating damage. And he was afraid in that position, but he wouldn't tell him. So he began to speak from anger. The bigger it got, the more he drove and was controlling and full of anger. And that's when I realized, okay, his problems are internal issues that have now bled over into his leadership, and we're all having to deal with somebody who never reconciled with their past. And so, low self-esteem, intimidated by strong people, intimidated by wealthy people, whatever, those kind of things can cause you, if you're not careful, to not really lead well. So you got to ask the questions and understand everything that you do in leadership flows from within. All right, let me give you number 7. Number 7 is this. Here's the question a leader asks. Are my fears at bay? Are my fears at bay? That is, all of us, I think, battle with that more than anything else, probably is fear. You know, you wonder, what would I do in life if I wasn't afraid? You know, if I wasn't afraid, I'd fail. If I wasn't afraid that I would be rejected. If I wasn't afraid that I'd look foolish. What would I do if I didn't have fears? And everybody has some measure of fears. You don't want to let those fears be in the driver's seat of your life. You got to make sure that in your life you handle that. And as I mentioned, there's a fear side to everything, but you got to get past the fear. Everything you do worthwhile is going to come up against that barrier of fear. And you have to decide, am I going to cross over that and do what I want to do and take more risk, or am I going to sit back and let the fear have control? Some of us fail to make the decisions we know we need to make out of fear of the consequence. We're afraid if I make this decision, somebody's going to be offended, somebody's going to leave, it's going to be a problem, I don't want to deal with the outcome, so it's uncomfortable or it's messy. Now let me ask you a question. If somebody were coming into your place of leadership, if maybe you got a church and you're leading that, or an organization, you're leading it, and if you know it real well right now, and suppose a new person was coming into it to take over, if you could, are there areas you'd say to give it perfect to them, to make it set up just right? Here's what I'd do. I'd make these changes. I would move this one over, or move that one out, or move this one up. What problems are there that you're allowing to still stay there because you're afraid to deal with? And if you left today, somebody else is going to inherit the same problems. But you're paid for. You're responsible to make sure it's running well. And so look at what you do and say, no matter how much it is, it may not be the right timing, but I am going to deal with it. I've got 3 decisions today. In fact, what's crazy is I have a file that I keep in mind where I speak. I've spoken 28 times in the last 14 days. And it's just been crazy just with files. My wife and I was going over it this morning about 6 o'clock, and when we're going through that, and still more to come. But then she looked over there and she just handed me a file. And she said, it's time for this. And she handed me a file, and I opened up, and I have a file of decisions that have to be made, and I have a date of when it's got to be made. And I remember thinking 3 months ago, this is a real problem that I've got to deal with somebody, and I waited until this day. It came today. So today, I'll deal with it. And I thought about all those decisions, and I thought, you know what's crazy? It got here faster. Now, I can do 2 things. I can ignore it and put it off, and one day down the road, it'll grow and bite me. Or I can deal with it today. So I say to some of you, this isn't, maybe of all the points you got to get, what is it that you need to deal with? That you say, if it's not today, at least I know I need to deal with it. I'm going to write down the timing. And if you don't deal with it and you let your fear take over, there'll be one day that decision will get bigger, that fear will get higher. And you know what I found in most decisions that are fearful decisions? They usually don't turn out to be worst case scenario anyway. We always think it's going to blow up the world. It really doesn't. Generally, you'll find after it's done, it's done. That's why I always recommend, too, along that line, look at it through the lens of that Susie Welch 10-10-10. It's the best way to deal with a problem. How will I feel in 10 minutes? How will I feel in 10 months? And how will I feel in 10 years? And if I make a decision on that, I'll generally get it right. If I make a decision, I say, how am I going to feel in 10 minutes? I may say, I don't like it. It hurts. It's painful. It's bad. 10 months, well, we're working through it, but we've made it. 10 years, I may say, best decision I ever made. And so look at whatever you do through 10-10-10. I used the illustration this way one time. You can do that on every decision. You want to have an affair. Suppose you just want to go have an affair. You say, I've been straight and narrow so long. Man, I just want to go, I'm married, but I'm just going to mess up. Well, go ahead and do it, okay? Here's the way to do it. Put it through 10-10-10. How are you going to feel in 10 minutes? In 10 minutes, you're going to feel great. 10 minutes, you're going to say, man, that was cool. I'm young again, da-da-da, and all that. And your ego is going to be just busting. How am I going to feel in 10 months? You're going to say, well, I made a pretty bad mess, and now I've kind of wrecked about his life. What are you going to say in 10 years? Oh, if I'd only listened. Why was I so impulsive? If it's a bad decision or a good one, how am I going to feel in 10 minutes? If I got to change something, maybe I have to let somebody go. Maybe I have to address a problem. How am I going to feel in 10 minutes? I'm not going to like it. It's going to be uncomfortable. This is, it could put more in the room that I want to deal with, but I know it needs to be. How am I going to feel in 10 months? I'm going to say, I'm glad I got that behind me. We're still kind of putting it on track, but we're better. How am I feeling in 10 years? Greatest thing I ever did. So make decisions without letting fear drive it. The next one along that line, number 8, is this one. Are my spiritual gifts developing? And that is, you have gifts. there's things that you've been equipped with, whether leadership or exhortation or giving or whatever it may be, serving. Am I developing my gifts? Am I doing what I should do the best I can with what I have? And so the key there is know your gifts first and then develop them. And your top gifts are going to be the ones that energize you, by the way. So try to balance your time around your gifts. Try to play to your giftedness. Try to play in your area of strength. If you're bad in a certain area, let somebody who's good in it do it. If you try to do what you're bad in, it drains you. Number 9 is this. Am I listening to the whispers and the prompting of the Holy Spirit? Am I really listening to God? I'm enjoying prayer lately because I'm just enjoying the listening aspect. You know, we think of prayer as only talking, and it's not. But we think of that. Prayer is just the talking side. And I'll speak about that this week in our church. But it's the listening aspect. And there is a tremendous value in listening as you're praying. You'll find this. When you go through your day, if there's some need you've got, ask before you do it. You know, just ask. God, what do you want me to do? And wait and listen and see if you get the answer right then. I had a friend the other day that told me his illustration was pretty cool. He said, I was doing a construction job for some Koreans. And he said, Bill, you ever been around Koreans before? And I said, yeah. If you know Korean people, if they have a Christian faith, they're very strong in the belief of faith. They just believe that God is interactive and God's going to work. And they're just strong. That's why the largest churches in the world, most of them are in Korea. There are churches over there that run 100,000 people and have 10,000 people praying at one time. They're insane as to how big they are. But they're people of faith. And this friend of mine said, I had the most unusual encounter. He said, we were going out to build this big building, and the 2 Koreans were there, and one of them was like the president of the company, and the other was like his CFO. And he said, and so they had told us about a big change we got to put. We got to dig this big trench down this way. And they said, you can either dig it here and turn there, or you can dig it around this structure and go there. And they said, here's the blueprints, but we've got these options. What do you gentlemen think we ought to do? He said they didn't go to a board. They didn't call the architects. They didn't get the engineers. He said they looked at me and they said, wait. And he said they walked away. And he said then one of them stopped and the other one walked about 5 feet past him. And he said, and he's just standing there walking around talking. He said then he walked up and he had a real confident step and he whispered, to the other guy, and the other guy nodded his head. He said he came up and he says, okay, we want to put it this way. And he said, all right. And he said, okay. So he said, I said, let's mark that down. He said, I got 2 other decisions. And he told him what they were. He said, each time the older Korean guy would say, okay, and he'd walk away, and then he'd be by himself. Then he'd walk up and tell his assistant, and then he'd come tell him. So the American contractor, friend of mine, said, excuse me, what are you doing? He said, well, help me with what you're doing, because you're not looking at charts, you're not looking at stuff. He said, oh, I'm talking to God. And he said, like how? He said, oh, no, God talks to me every day. He said, I say, you told me what choice, so I go over here. He said, he prays for me, but I ask God, should I put it here or there? And he said, then God tells me, so I tell you. And he said, Bill, I want you to know that not only were they good and right, and it was just so normal for him, he said, but in every one of those decisions, we found out later if we'd have done the other decision, there was a problem there that would cost them a lot more money. He said, I'm just telling you something happened there. He said, those guys were really talking to God. They were seeing things nobody saw, not even the engineers. And of the choices, it was the right choice. You know what they were doing? They were having a genuine conversation with God. We think of prayer like this. We think of prayer as bow your heads, fold your hands, close your eyes, and then talk for 35 minutes. If you talk 5 minutes, you feel guilty, I didn't talk longer. If you talk 35, okay, I prayed. If you talk an hour, you pop your buttons and tell everybody I prayed an hour today. And that's what we consider prayer. Is that really prayer? Let me ask you something. If your child or your spouse walks up to you today and they bow their heads and fold their hands and bow and close their eyes, and they say to you, I want to talk to you about all that's going on in my life and what I need. And you're standing in front of them, but they're talking to you that way. Your wife or kid, you're going to say, open your eyes. I'm right here. What's going on? Now, there's nothing wrong with it, but that's called formal prayer. And there's a place for that. You know, we can do that sometime in church. It's okay. But God's not interested in just formal prayer. There's family prayer too. You know what you do in the family? With the family, you're just carrying conversation. You remember when Jesus said, I'm no longer calling you slaves, I now call you friends, and you're part of the family and God's children. When Jesus went through 3 years with his disciples, he walked around and they talked together. They conversed. They had back and forth. And that's how they communicated with the living God. And I'm afraid that sometimes we're not listening to the Holy Spirit because we're saying, I got to wait till tomorrow when I go spend 30 minutes with him, and then I'll read my Bible, and then I'll wait and see if something comes down the road. When, if you'll try this, talk to him and wait and listen, I bet he won't put you on hold. I bet he'll answer you right away. He'll give you wisdom and insight as you talk. When we walk along the way is the key. So am I listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit and his prompting? That's going to be one of the biggest keys. Now, here's the deal along that line. If you listen to the Holy Spirit, your pace can be sustainable. If you're not listening to him, you're going to find yourself either taking on more and drained, or you're going to find and working the power of the flesh, or you're going to find yourself not taking on what's productive that would be an important issue or would bring you back the energy you need. So the secret's going to be, I don't have to worry about running too slow or running too fast if I'll listen to what God says. And that's really the question. So those are questions that a leader's got to ask himself. Nobody else is going to ask you. They're not going to walk up to you and say, hey, is your passion hot? Are you spending time with God? Are you listening to the Holy Spirit? They're not going to ask you all those things. Those are questions you got to ask yourself. But they're questions that if you will ask yourself, it will keep you in the game, keep you fueled, keep you going, and make a big difference for the long haul. So that's the goal. Now, Dr. Tim Cook's here. Come on up here for a minute. I'm gonna interview you for a moment. If Clint's got you, okay. Amanda's got your microphone. And I am grateful that you're here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
One of the most honoring guys anywhere that you'll ever meet, and I have loved you for a long time.
Yes,
let me ask you a couple of questions, Tim. Sure. We'll hang out on the golf course, but I want to talk to you about right here. And I had BJ even write me down a few of them. One of them was, I know your dad was a wonderful man.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad was probably one of the happiest men I ever knew.
Yes, sir.
The most generous man.
Yes, sir.
His dad, by the way, offered to give me a brand new Mercedes one time, and I wouldn't take it. And he just kept on wanting to give it to me. And I said no, but he would have done it. If I had not said no, you're not going to do it. He was a big influence on your life. What did your dad teach you? What were the things that you learned from him that you'd say, man, I wouldn't be who I was had he not taught me these principles?
Well, a lot of things. I mean, we could probably sit here all day, me and you, Dr. Purvis, and talk about that. But one of the main things, what you were talking about earlier, was passion.
Yeah.
The passion that he gave towards ministry, towards his family. I mean, he had a well-balanced passion, what was wonderful in his life. Everything that he did, he had a perfect balance towards ministry, towards family, towards each of his sons.
Yeah.
He had a great balance. Just like you were talking about before, just that passion. You said whenever you pass away, you want your passion to still be going. That was my father.
Yeah.
He passed away at his desk, working, passionate in his ministry. Yes, sir.
That's
and
right.
Keeping the main thing. One of the other things that he taught me was about doing things decently in order. In an order.
Yeah.
Having integrity, like you were talking about before. There was a lot of things that he said. When you have when you keep things decent and you keep them in order,
right.
That sometimes you might lose.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might win. You might have some increase. Mm-hmm. But like you said, in the long haul, it's going to pay off a lot more.
Yeah. And your dad really, he had the best attitude. I mean, no matter what he went through, he knew how to light up a room.
Absolutely, yes, sir. Yeah, positive. I mean, that's what he instilled in all of us, all of our sons, and that's what he also taught us to look for in others. Mm-hmm. Not the negatives in their life. Right. Find the positive and pull them out. See what God has placed inside of them and help them pull that out so they can have a better life. Yes. Yeah,
that's and when I mentioned about his generosity, geez.
Yes.
If he thought you wanted something, his dad, Debbie and I he got me, actually, he's the one that opened the door. He had me do the devotional at the Country Music Association Grammy thing, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So one of them did that. Well, I came, and you got all these stars there. And I came out of the banquet hall that night, Debbie and I walking out, and I looked out. Tim, I looked out the window, he had all these limos, people driving up. There's this long stretch limo, and Debbie said, man, I wonder who that is. We're thinking Garth Brooks. Da, da, da. It was your dad. The window comes down. He says, y'all get in. I've been looking for you. And we get in. He took us all over Nashville, introduced us to all the right players and all the people.
Yes, sir.
And he was the kind of guy that he was more interested. He died too early, but it was almost spending his life helping other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah, he worried about others' comforts more than himself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Yeah, that was one of the main things. That was a great learning tool as well.
Yeah.
Putting others above yourself.
Yeah.
Basically being an ultimate servant. As Christ teaches us to be a servant, he was. My father was a true servant of the people.
Yeah,
yes,
sure.
Sir.
Now let me ask you this: when you've stepped in that role now, and you're running the college, and you've got people everywhere, but and of all ages, what are some of the things you want those students that come to get their education? What do you want them to leave with more than just the knowledge?
More so, like we were just speaking about, to be a servant. I mean, when I talk to our students and I'm teaching, I teach them a lot to be a servant, because I believe before you can be a leader, you have to be a servant. Mm-hmm. Just as I teach them in the Bible, teaching about David. When David was anointed to be king, what did he do after that? He went straight back to being a servant. Yeah. Straight back to it. He served his brothers. He could have had an attitude about it. He could have said this and said that, but he didn't. He served his brothers. He served his father. And then from there, he got exalted. So that's why I really say to our students is that make sure before you step into a leadership role, you know how to be a servant first. Yeah,
that's all right. Now let me ask something else, and this will be the last one here. But when I first met you, you were a golf instructor.
Yes, sir.
And did that for a long time,
yes,
and worked on a country club and did that kind of stuff. What are the lessons you think you can pick up in golf that help you in life, that you basically look at a golfer and you say, if you want to play the game right and play it well, these are characteristics that you can learn the rest of your life? Because so much of that was sports, but I think golf's got one of the biggest on character development.
Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the biggest thing, just like we were talking about before, decently and in order. Yeah. Keeping things in order. Just as in the golf swing, things have to happen perfectly to hit the perfect shot.
Right.
Same thing in life. Same thing how we go through. Things have got to happen. We have to keep things in order and in perfect order for Christ to move in our life so we can hit that perfect shot.
Yeah.
I believe that. Yes, sir. Yeah. I've actually done an illustration with that in some teachings. Yes, sir. Is that to do things in order and in proper order, and Christ will bless you for it.
Yeah.
Stay humble in what you do. Yes, sir, and Christ will exalt you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I've heard that golf will test your integrity as much as any game.
It will.
Yeah,
it will. Yes, sir. Yeah. Now you'll get a few every once in a while who you'll be playing with, and they think they don't see, and they'll kick a ball and get a better. Yeah. I mean, you'll get that. But I never call them out on or whatever. But yes, sir. But it will test your integrity.
Yeah.
You'll see a lot of character come out in different people when you get on the golf course.
That's what I have a friend who said I take people to play golf, and that's when it's one of the final phases in his interviews.
Yes, sir.
And they don't know there'll be an interview, but he says I watch how they respond when something doesn't go their way.
Yes, sir.
I watch how they respond when somebody gets a better shot.
Yes, sir.
He said I watch how they respond when nobody's watching what they do. He said I look at the score. He said that's part of his his round of interviews.
Yes, sir.
How they play golf.
Yes, sir. If you want to see somebody's true integrity, true character, take them on the golf course.
So if he takes his clubs out and throws them in the lake, then we got a hot head.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Doesn't handle disappointment well.
Yes, sir.
I know. Well, Tim, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Glad
yes,
to have you. God bless you, buddy.
Honor.
Appreciate you, buddy.